The kids called him boring Mr. Peterson. The principal always gave him the worst classes in the school, and other teachers barely acknowledged he existed. But when gunshots echoed through the hallways and chaos erupted throughout the building, this quiet substitute teacher moved with deadly precision and tactical expertise that made everyone realize they had been completely wrong about him for 15 years. Welcome to the Untold Stories, where we discover the hidden heroes among us. Before we dive into this incredible story of hidden courage and forgotten valor, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be shared with the world, hit that subscribe button right now. These are the tales that remind us heroes walk among us, disguised as ordinary people, waiting for their moment to shine when we need them most in our darkest hours. Let's begin this amazing journey together. Jefferson High School had been David Peterson's second career for 15 long years. Every morning at exactly 7:30 sharp, he would park his faded Honda Civic in the same designated spot, walk through the same familiar entrance, and check the substitute board for his daily assignment. Room 204, room 318. Wherever they needed a warm body to babysit the kids nobody else wanted to deal with on any given day in this troubled school system that had failed them. The other teachers barely acknowledged his existence in their professional world. To them, he was just another aging substitute teacher, a failed educator who couldn't land a permanent position anywhere in the district. They would nod politely in the hallway, maybe offer a tired smile in the faculty lounge, but never bothered to learn his story or wonder why a man with his quiet confidence chose to work with problem students every single day without complaint. The other teachers barely acknowledged his existence in their professional world. To them, he was just another aging substitute teacher, a failed educator who couldn't land a permanent position anywhere in the district. They would nod politely in the hallway, maybe offer a tired smile in the faculty lounge, but never bothered to learn his story or wonder why a man with his quiet confidence chose to work with problem students every single day without complaint. The students were even worse in their treatment of him every single day. Boring Peterson, they called him behind his back, sometimes directly to his face, without shame. He never raised his voice, never sent anyone to the principal's office, never seemed fazed by their crude jokes or deliberate disruptions. His calm demeanor made them think he was weak, just another pushover who would take whatever abuse they dished out without any consequence. But there were subtle things about Mr. Peterson that nobody ever noticed or questioned during his years at the school. The way his eyes constantly scanned the room, cataloging exits and potential threats with military precision. How he always positioned himself near the door during class, never sitting behind the desk like other teachers. The deliberate way he moved, economical and precise, like someone trained to eliminate wasted motion in high-stress situations. His hands never shook during lockdown drills like other faculty members throughout the building, while other teachers fumbled with keys and struggled to maintain order among panicked students. Peterson moved with quiet efficiency that seemed almost supernatural. He would secure the door, position students away from windows, and maintain perfect calm that somehow transferred to even the most anxious kids in his care during these practice scenarios. Room 204 was considered the punishment assignment throughout the entire school district by all faculty members. That's where they sent the kids who had been kicked out of regular classes for various infractions. The fighters, the disruptors, the ones with serious anger management issues and behavioral problems that other teachers couldn't or simply wouldn't handle. Peterson never complained about getting these difficult assignments day after day, while other substitutes would request different rooms or refuse certain classes entirely. Peterson took whatever they gave him without protest or complaint. The administration thought he was just desperate for work, willing to take any assignment to make ends meet. They had no idea that he actually preferred working with troubled kids, that something in his past had taught him how to connect with young people who felt abandoned by the world around them completely. Tuesday morning, November 15th, started like any other day at Jefferson High School in the district. Peterson checked in at the main office, picked up his assignment sheet, and made his way to room 204 where 23 of the school's most challenging students waited. These were kids who had been written off by most of the faculty, labeled as troublemakers and lost causes, by a system that had given up on them long ago without hope. Among them was Marcus Williams, a 17-year-old with 3 suspensions for fighting other students. Sarah Chen, brilliant but angry, who had been caught hacking the school's computer system. Tommy Rodriguez, whose father was serving time for armed robbery, and who carried that shame like a weight on his shoulders. These were the forgotten ones, the kids society had decided weren't worth saving. But Peterson saw something different in each of them. As Peterson began the day's algebra lesson, writing equations on the whiteboard with his characteristic methodical precision, none of the students paid much attention to his teaching. They were used to substitutes who would just put on a movie or hand out busy work. But Peterson actually taught, explaining concepts with a patience that surprised even the most cynical among them. His voice was calm, steady, commanding without being authoritative. At 10:45 a.m., during second period, the first shots rang out from somewhere near the main entrance of the building. The sound echoed through the hallways like thunder, unmistakable and terrifying to everyone inside. Students throughout the school began screaming, teachers started panicking. and chaos erupted as everyone realized that their worst nightmare was actually happening in real time. An active shooter had entered Jefferson High. "Everyone away from the windows. Now," Peterson commanded, his voice carrying an authority that none of the students had ever heard before in their lives. There was no fear in his tone, no uncertainty, just cold professional competence. Marcus, who had never followed an adult's instructions without argument, found himself obeying immediately. Sarah stopped her usual smart remarks and did exactly what she was told without question. Peterson moved with the fluid grace of someone who had done this before, many times before in dangerous situations. He positioned the strongest students behind overturned desks, created clear sightlines to both entrances, and established fields of fire that would give them maximum advantage if the shooter entered their room. The kids watched in amazement as their substitute teacher revealed tactical knowledge that no civilian educator should possess. "Sir, how do you know all this stuff?" Tommy whispered, his voice barely audible above the distant sounds of chaos echoing through the school building. Peterson glanced at him for just a moment, and Tommy saw something in those eyes that made him understand this man was far more dangerous than any of them had ever imagined. "Just stay quiet and follow my lead," Peterson replied softly, his attention returning to the barricaded door with focus. The shooting continued somewhere in the building, getting closer with each passing minute that felt like hours. Through the small window in the classroom door, Peterson could see other teachers running in panic down the hallway, some crying, some shouting into their phones. But he remained perfectly calm, his trained mind automatically calculating distances, timing, and tactical possibilities while keeping his students safe and protected. Suddenly, the fire alarm began blaring throughout the building, adding another layer of chaos to an already terrifying situation for everyone inside. Standard protocol would be to evacuate immediately, but Peterson knew better than to follow those rules in an active shooter scenario. "Nobody moves," he said firmly, as some students instinctively started toward the door. "We stay here until I say otherwise. Trust me, your lives depend on it." At 11:07 a.m., they heard footsteps in the hallway outside their door, heavy boots moving with purpose toward their classroom. Peterson's entire body tensed, and the students could see him shift into what they would later describe as predator mode. His hand moved to something concealed behind his back, and for the first time, the kids realized their substitute teacher might be armed and ready to kill if necessary to protect them. The doorknob rattled as someone tried to enter the locked classroom from the hallway outside. Peterson held up his hand, signaling for absolute silence from his students. They could hear breathing on the other side of the door, heavy and labored, as whoever was out there tried to force their way inside. Peterson moved closer to the door, positioning himself at an angle that would give him maximum advantage when the inevitable confrontation finally occurred. "Mr. Peterson, are you in there? It's Officer Martinez from the Sheriff's Department." The voice came through the door, but Peterson didn't relax or move to unlock it immediately. Instead, he called out, "What's your badge number, and who's your supervisor?" The students looked confused, but Peterson was following protocols they couldn't understand, verification procedures that could mean the difference between life and death in this situation. After the officer provided the correct responses, Peterson carefully unlocked the door and allowed him entry into the secure classroom. Officer Martinez was a young deputy, probably mid-20s, with wide eyes and shaking hands that betrayed his inexperience with this type of situation. "We need to evacuate this room immediately," he said breathlessly, but Peterson shook his head firmly, his tactical assessment overriding standard police procedure. "Negative, officer. The shooter is still mobile, and we have better defensive positioning here than in the open hallways," Peterson explained calmly. Officer Martinez stared at Peterson in confusion, unused to civilians who spoke in military terminology and tactical language. "Sir, I need you to follow evacuation procedures," he insisted, but Peterson's expression made it clear that wasn't happening. "We hold this position until threat neutralization." That's when they heard more gunshots, much closer this time, followed by screaming that seemed to come from just down the hall. Officer Martinez's face went pale as he realized Peterson had been right about the tactical situation and threat assessment. "How did you know?" he whispered, looking at the substitute teacher with new respect and growing suspicion. "Training," Peterson replied simply, never taking his eyes off the hallway outside the door. For the next 20 minutes, they waited in tense silence while the sounds of the manhunt continued throughout the school building. Peterson kept his students calm and positioned, ready for whatever might come through that door. The kids had stopped thinking of him as their boring substitute teacher. Now they saw him as their protector, someone who clearly knew how to handle life and death situations with professional competence that saved their lives. At 11:31 a.m., Peterson's radio crackled to life with an important update. The students hadn't even noticed he was carrying one, but somehow he had been in communication with law enforcement throughout the entire crisis. "All units, suspect is down. Repeat, suspect is neutralized. Building is secure for evacuation procedures." Only then did Peterson relax his stance and allow his students to breathe freely for the first time. As they prepared to evacuate under police escort, Marcus Williams couldn't contain his curiosity any longer about their teacher. "Mr. Peterson, Who are you really? I mean, like, who are you actually? The question hung in the air, as 23 pairs of eyes focused on their substitute teacher, waiting for an answer that would finally explain everything they had witnessed during the most terrifying day of their young lives in this school. Peterson looked at his students, these kids who had seen him transform from boring educator to tactical professional in a matter of minutes. For 15 years he had kept his past buried, but today had changed everything. "My name is David Peterson," he said quietly. "But for 20 years before I came here, I was Special Agent Peterson, FBI hostage rescue team. I've been in situations like this more times than I care to remember in my career." The silence in room 204 was deafening as the weight of his revelation sank in completely. Sarah Chen, who had spent months trying to get under his skin with her sarcastic comments, felt tears streaming down her face. Tommy Rodriguez, who had assumed all adults were useless, stared in amazement at the man who had just saved their lives. Marcus Williams simply nodded, understanding finally dawning in his eyes about why Peterson was different. "You saved us," whispered Maria Santos, a quiet girl who rarely spoke in class during the entire semester. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone who you really were?" Peterson considered the question as they lined up for evacuation under heavy police presence. Because being a hero isn't about the title or recognition. It's about being in the right place at the right time and having the skills to make a difference when it matters most. Today, it mattered. As they walked through the hallways under armed escort, passing evidence of the chaos that had consumed the school just hours before, the students saw other teachers staring at Peterson with newfound respect and wonder. Word was already spreading throughout the building about the substitute teacher who had saved an entire classroom of students using skills that no ordinary educator should possess. His secret was finally out after 15 years. Principal Watson was waiting in the main hallway, his face pale and shaken from the day's events. When he saw Peterson leading his students to safety, he approached with obvious questions. "David, I need to know. How did you handle that situation so well? Other teachers are reporting that you seemed to know exactly what to do." Peterson looked at the man who had given him the worst assignments for 15 years, then simply said, "Experience." The FBI arrived within hours, and Peterson found himself answering questions from his former colleagues. Agent Sarah Cross, who had worked with him for 10 years, couldn't hide her amazement. "David Peterson, we thought you'd disappeared completely after you left the bureau. Why didn't you tell anyone you were here?" Peterson smiled sadly. "Because I wanted to build something instead of just stopping bad guys. These kids needed someone who understood them." As the interviews concluded and the school was finally declared secure, Peterson's students refused to leave his side. They had seen behind the mask of the boring substitute teacher and discovered a guardian angel who had been watching over them for years. "Will you still be our teacher tomorrow?" asked Tommy, fear evident in his voice that this revelation might change everything about their relationship with the man who had saved them. Peterson looked at these 23 kids who had become so much more than students to him over the course of this terrifying day. "If they'll have me," he said softly. "But you need to understand something. What happened today doesn't change who I am here with you. I'm still just Mr. Peterson, your substitute teacher who believes every one of you is capable of greatness. That badge I used to wear doesn't define me. Teaching you does. You define me." 6 months later, David Peterson was offered the permanent position as Jefferson High's crisis response coordinator, but he turned it down. He preferred staying in room 204 with his kids, the ones society had written off. He did agree to train other teachers in emergency response procedures, sharing his expertise without revealing the full extent of his background. His students never called him boring again, but they still called him Mr. Peterson. The story of what happened that day spread through the community, but Peterson never gave interviews or accepted recognition. He just continued showing up every morning at 7:30, parking in the same spot, teaching the same kids who needed him most. But now, when he walked through the hallways, there was a different kind of respect. People understood that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear substitute teacher badges. Marcus Williams graduated with honors and joined the police academy, inspired by the man who had shown him that strength comes from protecting others. Sarah Chen used her computer skills to help law enforcement track online predators. Tommy Rodriguez became a counselor, working with at-risk youth. Each of them carried forward the lesson Peterson had taught them, that one person with the right skills and courage can change everything in a single moment. Years later, when people asked Peterson about that day, he would always say the same thing: "I wasn't the hero. Those kids were. They stayed calm, followed instructions, and trusted someone they barely knew with their lives. That takes real courage." But his students knew better. They knew that boring Mr. Peterson was anything but boring. It was exactly the kind of hero the world needs. One who serves quietly, protects without recognition, and teaches through example. The FBI offered Peterson his old job back multiple times, promising better pay, more recognition, and a chance to hunt down terrorists again. But he always declined politely. "I found my calling," he would tell them. "These kids need someone who believes in them more than the Bureau needs another agent." And so David Peterson remained exactly where he belonged, in room 204, teaching algebra to society's forgotten children, one equation at a time. So remember this story the next time you meet someone ordinary, someone overlooked, someone society has written off as just another face in the crowd. You never know who they really are, or what they're capable of when the moment demands everything they have to give. Heroes walk among us every day, disguised as teachers, janitors, cashiers, and yes, even substitute teachers. They're waiting for their moment to shine. Subscribe if this story moved you. We'll see you next time.